Okay, let's just jump right in. There's so much public concern, almost a anxiety about technology and its impact on young people,
Correct.
especially here in the US.
Oh, absolutely. We hear about it constantly.
We hear the stories, we see all the policy proposals, but what does the data actually say? What's really going on?
And that's the core of our deep dive today. We are pulling directly from the Pew Research Center's Big Teens, Social Media and Technology 2024 report. It's fresh data.
Right, this was collected from what, almost 1,400 US teens, ages 13 to 17.
Yep. So it really cuts through a lot of the noise and speculation.
And I think the mission here isn't just to say, teens are online, we all know that.
Right.
It's to really understand what digitally connected means in 2024. We want to get past the general stats and find those aha moments that are hiding in the details.
Precisely. We need to define what the new normal actually looks like because the conversation is often about limits and screen time, but the data shows usage is more intense than ever.
And it's not uniform.
Not at all. Who is using what and how often, it varies wildly. We're
Hmm.
talking race, income, even political leanings. This is not one single digital landscape. It's many.
So let's start there with the basics, the platform hierarchy. If we just look at all US teens, who's winning the platform war right now?
The victor is still YouTube, and by a pretty wide margin.
That's all.
Still, it remains the top site. 9 in 10 teens say they use it. It's actually down a tiny bit from its peak, but the level of ubiquity it's just staggering.
And that ubiquity is so key because YouTube often flies under the radar when we only talk about like traditional social media.
Right, it's not quite the same thing.
It's used less for building an identity and more as a utility, a huge search engine, a learning tool.
A constant source of entertainment.
Exactly. It's basically infrastructure at this point.
Okay, so if YouTube is infrastructure, what about the platforms built for social interaction?
That's where you see TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat. They form a very clear second tier. Roughly 6 in 10 teens use TikTok and Instagram. And just behind that, 55% use Snapchat. And here's where I think it gets really interesting. The Great Decline.
The legacy sites.
Yeah, the platforms that basically define the last decade. The data shows what looks like a generational rejection of the old guard.
And you see that rejection nowhere clearer than with Facebook. Today, only 32% of teens say they use it.
32%.
Now, think back just 10 years to 2014. That number was 71%.
Wow. So Facebook lost more than half its teen audience in a decade.
It's an incredible drop.
It went from being the default digital town square 7 out of 10 teens to being, what, an afterthought? Barely a third.
And we see a similar, though maybe slightly less severe, drop for X,
Yeah.
formerly Twitter.
Right.
It's used by only 17% of teens today. That's about half what it was a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
It just suggests that for this generation, these big text-based centralized networks are, well, they're kind of relevant.
So the giants of the 2010s are collapsing. What's filling that void? Are there any rising players?
We see some modest gains.
Yeah.
WhatsApp usage, for example, is up 6 percentage points since 2022. It's now at 23% of teens.
Which is often more for like group chats and family. Yeah.
Exactly. But what's really notable is the resistance to new platforms from the big guys.
You mean Threads?
Yeah, Threads.
Yeah.
It launched with so much fanfare. But this survey included it for the first time, and only 6% of teens reported using it.
Only 6%. That is a really low initial uptake.
It tells you that capturing the youth market in 2024 is incredibly difficult, even if you're a massive corporation.
Okay, so that brings us to volume. It's one thing to say they use these platforms, but it's the difference between occasionally checking a feed and having something running constantly in the background.
And that intensity is the key driver behind all the current policy debates, all the talk about screen time.
Exactly. So let's look at that frequency data.
Mm.
The headline statistic here is, well, it's pretty eye-opening.
It really is. I mean, overall, you've got 96% of teens using the internet every single day. Every single day.
Which is almost everyone.
But the real kicker is that nearly half of them, the number is 47%, say they're online almost constantly.
47%. Think about that for a second. Nearly 1 in 2 American teens describes their internet use as almost constant.
And that rate has doubled from what it was just a decade ago. It was 24% back then. This generation has just fundamentally normalized a perpetual digital presence.
So what's driving that? Which platforms are pulling them in so intensely?
Well, YouTube is the most frequently visited. About 73% use it daily. And within that, 15% of teens say they are on YouTube almost constantly.
15%. Okay. What about TikTok? That's the one we always hear about with the continuous scroll, the infinite feed.
And that intuition is definitely grown out in the data. About 6 in 10 teens visit TikTok daily, and 16% report being on it almost constantly.
So it just barely edges out YouTube for that constant use.
Just barely, yeah.
Yeah.
Instagram and Snapchat are close behind, with about 1 in 10 on each of those constantly.
And we should pause here because the constant use for Instagram is actually going up. It jumped from 8% in 2023 to 12% today.
A really good point. So even the established platforms are finding ways to intensify that engagement.
So if you pull all that together, what's the big takeaway for you to hold on to?
The key metric is this. 1/3 of all American teens use at least one of those top 5 sites almost constantly. 1/3.
1/3. That just drives home the reality of this.
So now let's get into the demographic split, because this is where the generalized fear about all teens just dissolves into these really specific digital cultures.
The differences are enormous. It suggests totally different media diets, different information environments for different groups of kids.
Let's start with gender. We kind of know girls tend to adopt visual social media more, right?
That's correct, for general usage. Girls use TikTok and Instagram more widely than boys. But if you drill down into that almost constant number, the patterns get really interesting.
How so?
Girls are notably more likely to be almost constantly on TikTok. We're talking 19% of girls compared to 13% of boys.
So girls are driving that consistent engagement on the trend-driven, content-focused platform.
Right.
Where does it flip? Where are boys spending that constant time?
It flips heavily to YouTube.
Boys are significantly more likely to be almost constantly on YouTube. 19% of boys versus only 11% of girls.
Which reinforces that idea of utility, maybe for gaming, for information, tutorials.
Right, while girls seem more focused on the social and content feeds.
The gender split is interesting, but the split based on race and ethnicity, that is a massive gap, especially with TikTok. This, to me, is one of the most significant findings in the whole report.
It's the most critical finding, I'd argue. The general usage is already high. Black teens at 79% and Hispanic teens at 74% use TikTok way more than white teens at 54%.
But the constant use rate is where it just becomes profound.
The difference is stark. 28% of black teens and 25% of Hispanic teens report visiting TikTok almost constantly. Now compare that to white teens.
What is it for white teens?
Only 8%.
Wait. So it's 28% and 25% for Black and Hispanic teens versus 8% for white teens. That's nearly a 3-to-1 difference.
It is.
So for a huge segment of the population, TikTok isn't just another app. It's a central, constant fixture of daily life in a way it just is not for their white peers.
And think about what that means for media exposure. One group is 3 times more likely to be constantly engaging with that specific algorithm, that content feed. You're seeing the formation of very different digital cultures in real time.
And this holds for other platforms, too.
This higher constant use is also seen for YouTube and Instagram among Black and Hispanic teens. It's a broader pattern of platform intensity.
We should also mention that specific nuance with WhatsApp.
Oh, yeah. Hispanic teens are notably more likely to use WhatsApp than Black or white teens.
Which speaks to, maybe stronger ties to international family communication, a different kind of network.
A very different kind of network maintenance, yes.
Okay, let's also quickly touch on age. Older teens, 15 to 17, are just more likely to use everything, right?
Pretty much. Instagram, for example, is used by 72% of older teens versus only 43% of the 13 and 14-year-olds.
And they're more likely to be in that almost constant group overall.
Exactly. About half of the older teens are in that category versus 38% of the younger ones. Age and maturity, they just drive adoption.
Okay, what about income? We often assume higher income means more tech, more digital immersion, but the data here is more complex.
It really is. Take Facebook. Despite its decline, it's actually more common among lower income teens. 45% in households earning less than $30,000 use it, compared to only 29% in the highest income households.
That is so interesting. So the platform that parents and grandparents use is sticking around longer for lower income teens.
And TikTok follows a similar income pattern. Teens in lower income households are more likely to use it, 73%, compared to 59% in the highest income brackets.
Which again suggests that maybe the type of content, the communities, the accessibility, it's resonating differently.
Sure.
Finally, we have to look at political leanings. This partisan difference, especially with TikTok, is becoming so relevant for how young people get information.
This is a profound difference. Teens who identify as or lean Democratic are significantly more likely to use TikTok. We're talking 73% of them.
Okay, and for Republican-leaning teens?
Only 52%.
Wow, that's a 21-point partisan gap just for TikTok.
A 21-point gap.
When you think about the viral nature of political content on that platform, a gap that wide means Democratic and Republican youth are. They're basically consuming two entirely different media diets.
Absolutely. If one political group is mostly on platforms with these super reactive algorithms and the other group is less engaged there, the worldview they get as they become adults is going to be dramatically different.
Okay, so they're online constantly. We know where they're going based on these deep demographic divides. But what's enabling all this? Let's briefly close out with the hardware.
The short answer is the smartphone. That's the key. 95% of teens have or have access to one.
So it's nearly universal.
It is. But you also have large shares with computers, 88%, and gaming consoles at 83%, and tablets around 70%.
But access to some of that hardware is still a differentiator, especially by income.
It absolutely is. Access to a home computer is 93% in the highest income homes, but it drops to 78% in the lowest income ones. So while the phone is everywhere, the tools for, say, schoolwork or more complex creation, that still shows an income barrier.
And the biggest gender gap in hardware.
Oh, easily the gaming console. It's a major difference. 9 in 10 teenage boys have access to a gaming console. For girls, it's about 3/4, 76%.
Which speaks directly to different activities, different digital hobbies.
Entirely.
So if we zoom all the way back out, what connects all of this? We've seen that almost half of U.S. teens are online constantly. Where they go, how often they go there. It's all deeply segmented by gender, race, income, politics.
Yeah. The era of one platform dominating everyone, like Facebook did, is long over. It's been replaced by this YouTube, TikTok, Instagram hierarchy where intensity is just the norm.
So what's the synthesis here?
The essential synthesis is this. We are not watching a simple tech change. We're watching the formation of multiple distinct digital cultures. The most significant finding is that deep demographic segmentation. Two teens in the same city can be living in completely different information universes.
So what does this all mean for the future?
Well, here's the thought for you to chew on. Given that nearly half of teens are constantly online, and considering these incredibly distinct usage patterns, you have to ask yourself, if these young people are being fed wildly divergent worldviews, filtered through platforms that cater to their specific identity and leanings, how will that affect civic life, social cohesion, their shared understanding of reality as they all become adults?
They aren't consuming the same things.
Not at all. Not the same content and not at the same intensity. And that divergence is probably only going to widen. Something for you to think about as you go about your day.